Grimm's Household Tales, translated by Margaret Hunt, read by Paul Martin. This audiobook and its underlying text is in the public domain. Number 62, The Queen Bee. Two kings' sons once went out in search of adventures, and fell into a wild, disorderly way of living, so that they never came home again. The youngest, who was called Simpleton, sent out to seek his brothers, but when at length he found them, they mocked him for thinking that he could get through the world with his simplicity, when they both could not make their way, and yet were so cleverer. They all three travelled away together, and came to an ant-hill. The two eldest wanted to destroy it, to see the little ants creeping about in their terror, and carrying their eggs away. But Simpleton said, "Leave the creatures in peace. I will not allow you to disturb them." Then they went onwards, and came to a lake, in which a great number of ducks were swimming. The two brothers wanted to catch a couple and roast them, but Simpleton would not permit it, and said, "Leave the creatures in peace. I will not allow you to kill them." At length they came to a bee's nest, in which there was so much honey that it ran out of the trunk of the tree where it was. The two wanted to make a fire beneath the tree and suffocate the bees in order to take away the honey, but Simpleton again stopped them and said, "Leave the creatures in peace. I will not allow you to burn them." At length the three brothers arrived at a castle where stone horses were standing in the stables, and no human being was to be seen. And they went through all the hills until quite at the end they came to a door in which were 3 locks. In the middle of the door, however, there was a little pane through which they could see into the room. There they saw a little grey man who was sitting at a table. They called him once, twice, but he did not hear. At last they called him for the 3rd time. When he got up, opened the locks, and came out, he said nothing, however, but conducted them to a handsomely spread table. And when they'd eaten and drunk, he took each of them to a bedroom. Next morning the little grey man came to the eldest, beckoned to him, and conducted him to a stone table, on which were inscribed 3 tasks that, when performed, could deliver the castle from enchantment. The first was that in the forest, beneath the moss, lay the princess's pearls, 1,000 in number, which must be picked up, and if by sunset 1 single pearl was wanting, he who had looked for them would be turned into stone. The eldest went there, and sought the whole day. But when it came to an end, he had only found 100, and what was written on the table came to pass, and he was changed into stone. Next day the second brother undertook the adventure. It did not, however, fare much better with him than with the eldest. He did not find more than 200 pearls, and was changed to stone. At last the turn came to Simpleton also, who sought in the moss. It was, however, so hard to find the pearls, and he got on so slowly that he seated himself on a stone and wept. And while he was thus sitting, the king of the ants, whose life he had once saved, came with 5,000 ants, and before long the little creatures had got all the pearls together and laid them in a heap. The second task, however, was to fetch out of the lake the key of the king's daughter's bedchamber. When Simpleton came to the lake, the ducks which he had saved swam up to him, dived down, and brought the key out of the water. But the 3rd task was the most difficult. From amongst the 3 sleeping daughters of the king, he was to choose the youngest and dearest. They, however, resembled each other exactly, and were only to be distinguished by their having eaten different sweetmeats before they fell asleep. The eldest a bit of sugar, the second a little syrup, and the youngest a spoonful of honey. Then the queen of the bees, which Simpleton had protected from the fire, came and tasted the lips of all three, and at last she remained sitting on the mouth which had eaten honey, and thus the king's son recognised the right princess. Then the enchantment was at an end. Everything was released from sleep, and those who had been turned to stone received once more their natural forms. Simpleton married the youngest and sweetest princess, and after her father's death became king, and his two brothers received the two other sisters. Grimm's Household Tales, translated by Margaret Hunt, read by Paul Martin.